I recently received an email from Accucraft asking me if I'd be interested in reviewing the Accucraft site pushing tool, and took a look at it online first, and it looks really sharp. The question is whether or not it'll hold up, whether or not it'll do the job. I did check it out, and stay tuned. We're going to talk about it. Thanks for joining me today while we take a look at the Accucraft site pushing tool, distributed by Kitvance and available on Amazon, and they did provide us with a 20% discount code. I'll put it in the description below. When I first looked at this, it looked really sharp. Looked like there was a lot to it, but I've been fooled before by all show, no go. And the question that I had is it really going to live up to it? Now, for the longest time, when I just was dealing with your basic generation, middle generation type Glocks, not your extra large or extra small, I got a, what is this, 40 some odd year old Glock site pusher tool. Works just fine for that specific type of Glock. But it didn't work for everything. So I got this Jennings Universal, and it's a very stout tool that is extremely strong and works okay. I've got a couple of nits to it and a couple of things I like about it, but it still didn't seem to do really what I wanted to do. So I checked out the Accucraft, and well, first of all, they I want to make it clear that they're not paying me for this, but they did send me the site tool for free, so they're not paying me to do this review. Came packaged in plain brown wrapper, but well padded box. Came with let's see, some basic tools in there, and also came with a user manual that is fairly easy to understand. I think there's a couple of things lacking in it, and it was typical. It's written by somebody that English was not their first language, but it actually did a pretty good job. I had a chance to use it on a couple of different guns. The one that I was really concerned about was using it on my car MK9. I'll put a link to the description somewhere up there. And it was a gun that if this site tool was going to mar the finish, I didn't care. It's already really well marred, or well used gun. And if anything damaged on the sights, I didn't really care about that, because I was going to replace it. If you saw the video, I didn't I didn't like the excess big dot sights on it for accuracy. Now, a lot of people like it, but this isn't talking about the pros and cons of that sight. We're only talking about whether or not this sight tool will work. So I'm going to move over to the actual editing bench here and set the camera up there, and we'll bring the site tool up and we'll talk about it. As I mentioned, I've tried the Jennings, a Glock tool. I've even gone to the Dawson Precision just punches. Of course, the Jennings tool cost me well north of $100. The Glock tool, got it so long ago, I can't remember how much I paid for that. The Dawson system, you can get like 5 punches for $25. Covers about everything you need. Some people will say that the Accucraft looks a lot like the Wheeler engineering tool, and they do have a lot of resemblance. Now, I like my Wheeler tools, but the Wheeler site tool, even though it looks the same, cost about twice as much. I did see one review where the reviewer said that the Wheeler tool seemed to be more refined and everything turned easier. I'm going to talk about making things turn easier here as we get into it. I also want to mention that when you look at this, you're going to see that I took the height adjuster out of my tool, and comes with a washer that is now going to be set aside. I'm not sure I'll ever use that. The instruction manual talks about adjusting it, and I just could not make this work with even a thin, relatively thin slide like the car. Get a much thicker slide in there, and it's definitely not going to work. However, we take this thing apart and take a look at it. By the way, notice that these do turn fairly easy here, and they do actually spin, contrary to what that one review said. Now, as I'm taking this apart, I will mention that every single metal-to-metal surface that had any kind of movement on it, which includes these nuts here, the threaded areas that they go onto, even the washers. I did put just a little bit of lube, using Wilson's Ultimate Lube, as a matter of fact, and everything in here. In fact, I even took this apart. Hope it doesn't void my 3-year warranty on this. But I actually took this upper assembly apart and lubed everything. This spins nice and easily now. The slide moves back and forth. Again, there's a little bit of lube on the surface there. Even the height adjuster I took out and lubed everything on that so that everything does move nice and easy. The locking screws for to lock the slide into place, everything. So if it was metal to metal and it moved, it got lubricated. But again, I want to talk about the height adjuster briefly here. And again, I did have to take this piece out because it just wouldn't fit with the with even a small slide in there. However, one thing to be aware of too, and I'm not gonna clamp this in because I took all the tape off. But when you're doing the front sight, if you set this down to where the front sight is in alignment, I don't know if I can really show it here or not, but this sight adjuster actually just barely slides down inside the ejection port on this short slide. So that height adjuster device is basically useless on some slides. Now, the longer slide it'll work fine because the ejection port's going to be farther back. This MK9's only got a 3-inch barrel, but I did want to see how it's going to work on small. If it works on small, I'm relatively certain it's going to work on large. So you can see I did tape the slide. I want to make sure that the metal-to-metal areas on here going against the slide are not going to have leave any permanent marks. So I just put painter's tape on it. It worked out fine. And I've had this thing in and out several times. And yeah, it's a scratched up slide. Again, that's why I wanted to use this particular gun, or a slide anyway. And but there's no additional marks on it. Even where the single contact point from the height adjuster hit the slide when I was doing the rear sight, then I didn't have any marking and didn't even tear through the tape. So that was a good plus. One thing I really like about this that I don't have on any other sight tool is these striations here in the bottom. I think you get a little reflection on them, but they just barely feel the notches there. But it does help in getting the slide aligned so that it's nice and straight, and that way you're not pushing at an angle, and keeps the alignment where it should be, keeps them from moving out of position. Now again, that was one problem that I had with the Jennings, is the slide would torque some in there even when I had it locked in there properly. And I was really concerned about that because when you're putting the pressure away from the lockdown points, and again the lockdown is going to be toward that direction, yet the sight adjuster is out here. So it's putting pressure here, putting pressure mainly on this particular contact point here. So I was a little worried about it, but having 4 contact points to lock the slide into place was certainly made it a non-problem. So once you get the slide in place, get your tape on there, get everything relatively aligned, then I put the sight tool, the upper on it, and actually tweaked the slide position just a little bit, and set the, let's see if I can get it on the camera here without things falling off, set the sight tool so that it just didn't quite contact the slide. Let me crank this down just a little bit. So it didn't quite contact the slide, and then I tightened everything down from there and was able to push this thing. No torquing, no moving, nothing. I was a little concerned also with tight sights. Is this going to be difficult with just this wheel on it? HR Funk did a video. If you haven't followed his channel, he's got a lot of interesting stuff on it. He reviewed this sight pusher, and he took the sights out of his Remington R51. Now, maybe HR Funk and I are the only 2 people in the world who still have a Remington R51, but anyway, he said that he couldn't get the sights out of that with any method he tried, but yet this tool managed to get it out. He was skeptical at first, but it did seem to work. Right, so again, with everything lubed up, this does move relatively easy. The front sight on this car was a little more difficult than the rear sight, but I still managed to get it with just simple hand pressure. And of course, they say don't put any tools on it to to provide additional force. Now you'll also see that the actual pusher component of the upper here has a straight side on it, which you use for most of the sights, and then it also has an angled side, which you use for angled sights. This just reverses. Take out those two screws. By the way, there it does come with a tool set and a couple of additional screws. Take those out, flip this around, put it back on. Now one issue with this, of course, this is not adjustable vertically. I imagine there'd be some torquing or alignment problems if this had vertical slots in it, but it's in one position, or for square, the other position once you flip this over for the for angled sights, such as on a Glock. Now, one thing they say, it is not allowed to use the angled sides of the front pusher block to adjust straight sided. Now, I don't know, they say it's not allowed. I don't know, what, somebody going to come and take it away from me if you do, or spank you, I don't know. And again, that's the translation in the owner's manual. But I'm sure it'll work fine on Glock. I just didn't have to have any Glock sights that I'm going to change. I am going to put new sights eventually in that MK9 if I decide to continue to keep the gun. So this thing is it's really surprisingly well made. I mean, it's not just all glitz. It actually has good function. I was concerned about the dovetail sight in the front. I like to push on the actual base end of the dovetail, and you really can't do that with this. The pusher block is wider than the dovetail, so I had to push right on the sight. And again, that's why I experimented with this gun to see what would happen. I was concerned that would that cause any bending of the front sight or any breakage, and it didn't. It actually worked out very, very well. And I adjusted the same way. I set the legs down on the front sight for the adjustment, and then got my vertical height out of it. So we set the sight tool so it's just a hair above the slide, and then clamp down with the of course you got to put the washers and the adjustment, or excuse me, the knobs on here to tighten it down. Just finger tight. They don't have to be super tight. And then once you get everything tightened down, then this moved fairly easy. I did have to put more torque on it to go take the front sight out than I did the rear sight. Again, you check your manufacturer's recommendations for which way the sights go, but rear sights will generally, in fact all sights will generally go right to left. So when I'm doing the front sight on this, then I still want to go from right to left to take it out, left to right to put it back in. On the rear sight, left to right to put it back in. It has alignment marks on it so that you can actually use those. And in fact, I recommend, if you're going to replace sights, before you start moving the front sight, or rear sight for that matter, get it so that the bar is just touching the sight. Look where your alignment is up here, write that down, and then when you put of course you're going to take it out right to left. So when you do that, I don't have the height adjuster, because you can see that it's going down. Height adjuster is going down inside the ejection port there. So anyway, then you'll take it out. When you put it back in, then you'll use those alignment marks to align the sight. Now you can also, let's get this off of here. You can also, you can see that I clamped it in the vise. I put a little painter's tape on it. I didn't want to mar the finish on this, but you don't have to clamp this in a vise. This will actually still work handheld. It just means you got to put both hands on, but once you get everything clamped down in place and get these the top tightening, or I guess just to snug them down. I'm sure they call them something else specifically in here. I didn't read the directions. I'm getting to the point where I actually read directions beforehand now. It used to be I'd read directions only after I started running into a problem. I won't say I don't do that occasionally now. You can see these, once I put a little lube on there, these do spin nice and easy. So this is a well-made product. All right, so get that clamp down where I want it, and I can still work this by hand just by holding it if I need to. You don't need to clamp it in a vise. All right, so when I get all this done and use it, I am pleased with this. It's a much better product than I initially anticipated, because again, a lot of times people go by they build products with an ounce of image is worth a pound of performance or something to that effect, and this certainly has the image. Nicely finished. You can see some machine marks on there, but that's just not a big deal. I mean, they're very light, but is that going to affect the performance? Absolutely not. Do I really care about that? No. So it's probably going to be used much more than the Glock tool or my Jennings, and I'll still use Dawson punches on certain applications. But for even just making fine tuning of a gun when I've got the gun out on the range, I can take it apart, field strip it, take the slide off, and use this tool by hand without clamping a device, and I will be very, very happy. So the ounce of image, actually it's got a pound of image to equal that pound of performance. So the big question though is, how is it going to hold up? And again, I'm a hobbyist. I'm not a professional gunsmith going to be changing sights several times a day, using the tool multiple times every day. I'm going to use it occasionally. For the hobbyist, this is going to last my lifetime and probably pass down to my kids and last their lifetime. I'm suspecting too that just based on what I've seen so far for quality, that this is also going to work well for the professional. So as you can see, this Accucraft sight pushing tool, it lives up to its looks, and it worked really well, certainly on that on the car MK9. Didn't damage it, didn't mark it, didn't damage the sights in any way, shape, or form. This is going to work really, really well for, I trust, a long time to come. So thanks for stopping in while we take a quick look at the Accucraft sight pusher.